Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. So last week, I had a really interesting interview with Ralph Ben-Mergui, who argued that one of the isms that's still alive and well is ageism. And he was arguing that we should think about ageism becoming sageism, and that people over the age of 50 or 60 or whatever that age is should be thought about as contributing great wisdom and experience to the workplace and to society. And that too often we only think about young people and youth as a positive trait. And so I came across someone that really is fascinating, and her name is Helen Hirsh Spence, and she describes herself as a later in life entrepreneur who founded a for-profit social enterprise. That's interesting. Not a not-for-profit, a for-profit social enterprise, having witnessed firsthand how ageism was taking the toll on her generation, and the social economic fabric of Canada. Her social enterprise is called the Top 60 Over 60, and it provides leadership, consulting, and training on age inclusion and diversity. She publishes articles, speaks on conferences, organizes events to promote and reframe the narrative of aging. This sounds fascinating. And she's also joined by Valerie Fox, who I've interviewed before. She is an expert at business incubators and accelerators. I interviewed her in regards to a fascinating women's incubator called Ella at York University. And she is an example of someone who is adding sageism to the community and to the business community. So, ladies, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Maybe, Helen, I could start with you.
Sure.
Why the top 60 over 60?
Well, as you said in the introduction, this world, first and foremost, because of the demographic shift. So I'm 72, and I am much later in life entrepreneur. I was 67 when I got started. And the reason it was so late was simply because I didn't know anything about entrepreneurship, and there was absolutely nothing out there that would help me move forward. So recognizing that, I created, a social enterprise that would help people with their entrepreneurial mindset, ageism, their self-limiting beliefs, because interestingly enough, older folks such as myself, we have internalized ageism over a lifespan. It's not as if it's called internalized ageism. And what it does is it limits us. And I realized the reason why I started Top 60 Over 60 was because I was experiencing ageism firsthand. And I also, although I had been a leader in my previous career, the minute I stepped out of it, I became invisible and irrelevant, even though I had more experience and wisdom, perhaps as well, to share than ever before. And yet
you became invisible and irrelevant. Really? Seriously?
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting how at cocktail parties and things, when you have a title, people want to talk to you, but when you no longer do, because you've shifted gears and done something else, such as purely not-for-profit work, which I did for a while, it's called gendered ageism. Older men are valued and older women are devalued. It's our youth-centric culture. It's typical. And anybody who who leaves the world of work, who's older or who has gray hair, will tell you how ageist society is.
Valerie, do you agree?
Yeah, it's interesting because from our other interview, you heard that I work with a lot of youth, actually. So I'm working with startups and founders who are in their 20s and 30s and early 40s, and they're starting businesses. Well, the interesting thing is here I am at 67, my own business, and I'm meeting lots of colleagues my own age who are also entrepreneurs. The interesting thing is that for youth now, it's actually getting easier, thank God, because I think that that's very important that we're helping our youth to create the businesses of the future. But what's so interesting is that there are so many people in my realm, age realm, that are also doing unbelievable stuff. And a lot of us are thought of as the mentors, but not necessarily as people who are going to create really awesome businesses. So when I met Helen, I thought this was awesome. I thought, number one is, here's a kindred spirit, but here's someone who wants to do something about it.
But when the three of us were growing up, there was a line that was everywhere about don't trust anyone over 30.
I remember.
Yeah, that's because that's because we were at that age at the time. I bet you if you ask those same people now, they wouldn't say that.
But don't you find it interesting, Helen? Like I have friends now who are all ages.
Me too.
And I actually look back on the time when I was in my 30s and I thought, how awful that I actually didn't even consider. Like I was one of those people who practiced ageism. And it actually upsets me that that's true, but it is. And I missed out. I missed out on working with people who are phenomenal.
I just did an interview with someone talking about discrimination in the workplace, and they talked about race, they talked about religion, they talked about sexual orientation, but ageism never came up.
And that's why I created this consultancy or a social enterprise, because we're providing those services to businesses to thrive in today's, rapidly aging world. So we're looking at, we focus on age diversity and leveraging the talent of all generations, as Val is talking about. It's in that way that we can build a workplace culture that is inviting to all generations. So I'm working with businesses to help them with the multi-generational workforce, which we never had before the last 10 years. We didn't have five generations.
We're chatting tonight, I apologize, with Helen Hirsh Spence and Valerie Fox about ageism, about the quality, the value that people over the age of 50 or 60 or 70 can add to the workplace. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Helen and Valerie in just a minute. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're having an interesting conversation tonight about ageism and about how to combat ageism. And I've got two guests, Helen Hirsh Spence, and she's a fascinating individual. She has started a for-profit social enterprise called Top 60 Over 60. And I've also got Valerie Fox, who is a expert in business accelerators and incubators and helps entrepreneurs of all ages get started, and she mentors them. Helen, tell me, what is Top 60 Over 60? What is it?
So it's a social enterprise, but it's for profit. So essentially, we're a consultancy. And what we do is we provide services for businesses. We also do workshops and courses and whatnot for individuals, but really focusing now on businesses because of the talent shortage. And we know that the older demographic has so much potential and is not valued and is not even considered to be hired or rehired, recruited, retained, whatever. And so we focus on that whole multi-generational workforce and encourage employers to consider doing things a bit differently. And perhaps rather than picking up the millennial or the Gen Z, and I'm not against any of them, but there are very great differences in work ethics as well as qualities, such as interpersonal skills, communication skills. They're simply different across the generations. So when I work with somebody who's younger, I benefit enormously from their expertise and their talents that are very different from mine. And so the bottom line is that there's greater productivity, there's greater innovation and creativity, and there's more profit when you combine generations. It's just like any other diversity. The only thing that's different is that nobody pays attention to age diversity. There's less than, in one study, I saw 8% who include age in diversity policies and strategies for businesses. It's more like 50% perhaps, but interestingly enough, age is the only one that intersects with all the other isms. I can be Black, I'm going to get old too. I may be gay, I'm also going to get old if I'm lucky. So it intersects with everything, and it affects absolutely everybody if they're lucky enough to age. Age is something to be proud of, to look forward to, but it's got a really bad reputation. And that's what Top 60 is all about. just to add quickly, we named it that because I wanted to bring attention to older generations and what they have to contribute. And at the moment, looking for sponsors and partners to hold an event and a conference, because we need role models. We need youth to see the Valeries of this world and what they have to.
So every year I see in the Globe and Mail, the top 40 under 40. Are you going to have the top 60 people that are over 60?
That's my intention.
Oh, really?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. It may not be in the Globe and Mail. It would be great if they picked it up. But I think that a lot of businesses are doing a disservice to themselves when, in fact, they don't recognize the potential and the power and the wisdom. They say that experience trumps knowledge and skill. You can learn anything, but you can only have lived experience by being a certain age or aging per se. So
your write-up talks about reskilling older adults by introducing an entrepreneurial mindset.
That's right.
Why do you have to do that? Is that because we all are going to lose our jobs, and so therefore we all have to be consultants?
Not at all. No, an entrepreneurial mindset doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to become a business at all. It's a mindset. It's like a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset, but it focuses on different kinds of competencies that are good for absolutely everybody, such as problem solving, developing creativity skills, looking at critical thinking, spotting opportunity. I mean, I give courses on all of these things because you have no idea if you stop and you learn how to do certain things, such as open your eyes to new opportunities, you're going to see them, and then you can develop something new out of them if you're interested in doing that. But it's worth it. It's just a mindset. Valerie.
Yeah, I just want to jump in because, I'm all over this. The entrepreneurial mindset is all about the 21st century skills that are needed today. Now in the digital age, it's more important than anything to have, and also to have empathy and look through that kind of lens to really, for us to work better together, because now, especially in the digital age, it's harder and harder to do anything just by yourself. So these kinds of skills are necessary. And that's what's so interesting about what Helen's doing with Top 60 over 60. What she's trying to do now is, by having multi-generational teams coming together, you get the best of all worlds. And so with youth, they're right in the middle of the digital age, and they are trying things out that people of my generation started 10, 12 years ago, but we weren't born into it. And so that's a different mindset. So that's very helpful to me when I hang out with the younger generation. But I know through my experience that I can bring the lens of what it's like to work in multidisciplinary teams, for instance, and what it's like to have experienced different things that people who haven't had the experience haven't yet. And if we're open about it, and that's where the 21st century listening skills come in, then we actually can accelerate any changes that we want to put in. I've got a great example. One of my clients, one of my entrepreneurial clients, has a store that's online and in-store. And she actually has someone that she's been working with for a number of years, maybe 5 years. And this woman is in her 50s. She's shy about using some of the digital ways of communicating. But boy, is she amazing in her organizational skills, her administration skills, how she talks to customer and all that kind of stuff. Well, they brought on this amazing young woman who is, I think she's around 28, late 20s, and she is just a whiz when it comes to certain kinds of digital tools. Well, what's so interesting is you put them together and they are soaring. They just accelerated everything that's going on in that store. And it was a brilliant, brilliant move by the store owner to do that, both online and in store.
I have an intern. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say I have an intern now who's a business student at Smith School of Business. I can't tell you what a difference it makes just to have conversations and what I'm learning from her. It's amazing.
And then also what you're teaching her.
Right? Oh, for sure. But that, yeah, it's the reciprocal. And that's the kind of programming that we'd like to see in more businesses.
But one of the things that I found interesting about your research, at least that you wrote up, Helen, is that you talked about some of this ageism is self-inflicted, that you were trying to draw attention to the impact of ageism on older people and how they perceive themselves, that they self-limit themselves and they become isolated. And that has got to be worse than anything if you're prejudiced against yourself.
But you don't realize it. I mean, it's an unconscious bias. You're probably conscious of other biases that you have. But when you start think, for instance, I'll give you some classic examples. A few years ago, I would have said, oh, when I lost the keys or misplaced them or something, that I was having a senior's moment. I call everyone out on that now, because it's not because I'm losing my mind or I'm a senior. It's simply because there's a whole lot in there. And sometimes I forget certain things, but so does a 30-year-old. But there are all these expressions that we've used throughout our life, such as you can't teach an old dog new tricks, or oh my God, she's not dressed appropriately, or, any number of expressions that are very, very ageist. And when you hear that over a lifetime, it really affects you. And it affects everybody, but they just don't know to what extent. When I speak publicly to groups or to organizations, they all come away realizing how much bias they have internalized themselves.
How do you tell people to not feel old?
I don't tell people not to feel old. I don't use that kind of language.
Okay, to not be ageist. How do you tell people to not be ageist that are over 60, over 70?
For themselves, or do you mean
both, that they both for themselves and for others? Because what you're saying is it's self-inflicted. So how do you tell them that they've still got this great future? I interviewed, as I mentioned, Ralph Murgy, who wrote a book called "I Thought He Was Dead," which was, you said that you felt isolated and invisible. He felt that people thought he was dead because he was over 65 and had sort of disappeared from the public eye. And he wanted to tell people, I'm still alive. Well, and I can be a sage. And he reinvented himself. So how do you motivate people that are over the age of whatever, 50, 60, 70, to have that positive attitude?
Well, I talk to them and I role model what I believe in. There's nothing that I can't do either, and I'm trying to prove it. So, my past history was as a secondary school principal and a headmistress of a girls' school. My life has been surrounded by younger people and people of all generations as staff. I can give you two perfect examples of how some of my students have actually changed my life. And it's remarkable. So I'll give people examples. I will also tell them, some of the statistics or the facts that we are living now 30 years longer than our grandparents did. It's called the longevity bonus. That's the equivalent of another adult lifetime. That our brain capacity increases, in fact, with crystallized intelligence as opposed to fluid intelligence, which younger people have. But
hold it. What's the difference between crystallized intelligence versus fluid intelligence?
Well, crystallized intelligence is sort of like the way it sounds. It's there. It's in there. It's a different part of the brain. Whereas fluid intelligence is something that brains stop growing after the age of 30. So, our brain capacity kind of peaks at 30, but it doesn't mean that we can stop learning. So it's really about encouraging people to have an open mind, a different type of mindset, learn new things, keep healthy, active, engage with people of all generations. And you'll find that if you think positively about aging, you can, the research shows if you're positive about aging, you will live longer, you can walk better, you are less likely to get dementia, even if you have the gene for dementia. It's phenomenal, the research that has been done in this area now that dispels and debunks so many of the myths that we all have about getting older. Go ahead, Val.
No, I'm loving what you're saying, but it is interesting. A couple of things that came to mind. Number one is it was one of the ageist things that people say, like, you don't look
Yeah.
whatever. And you've had it happen to you. I've had it happen to me. And what's interesting is how we box everyone in
I thought
that
people
thing.
thought that was a compliment. I guess it's not.
I know, you know, it's funny because, yeah, I used to go,
It's
oh, yeah,
backhanded.
except it is kind of backhanded. It's like, well, what did you expect, right? And then the other thing, Helen, that you were saying is about engagement. I just wanted to really support what you're saying for it, because it's, you can't tell people not to feel old or ageist if that's how they're feeling at the moment. But exposing and engaging with exposing yourself to other people from all generations who are doing really cool stuff. I feel blessed every day because I hang out with amazing people. They don't mind hanging out with me. I love hanging out with them, and we do great work. And the interesting thing is it's really making a difference. It's important, I think, for all people, all ages, to feel that they matter and that they're doing great things with the people that they're with. So I just wanted to throw that in, because I think that engagement is a very key word for really enabling people to see that age isn't something to hold them back. If anything, they've got that much more to share.
What do you mean engagement?
Socially. Social engagement is one of the key factors to keep people from aging negatively or declining or becoming vulnerable and dependent. We need each other, in other words. So and it's more and more apparent. So when I said about you don't become isolated because of ageism, but you sometimes isolate yourself because you've internalized, well, what value do I have anymore? I mean, I had a career for 50, no, not for quite 50 years, but for 35 years. And then suddenly it's not like any of that knowledge has disappeared. I'm just applying it in new and different ways by reinventing myself. Retirement is a terrible concept. Retirement was brought about in the 1930s when the average length of life was 62. 65 was a reward for living that long. I mean, we live 30 years longer now, on average, and a child born today will live to an average of 100 years. They're talking now about 20 and 30-year-olds should expect to work into their 70s and 80s.
So should the age of retirement be increased?
Well, I think we have to come up with graduated different policies. It's very difficult to talk about.
Can I interject on that one?
Yeah,
oh yeah,
ahead.
Absolutely. Because I do believe in the 21st century, what we're seeing now, especially now that I'm into entrepreneurship and I'm watching the trends of how people are working, that people will have multiple careers in their lifetime. So retirement has a different word. It's a different way of looking at life. You're not retiring and just quitting. You're not working at a particular company for 30 years. And then you could, I suppose that there are a few companies or a number of companies out there that still do that kind of stuff. But what I'm seeing as a trend is that there are going to be multiple careers in your lifetime. Right. And it means though that you have opportunities to do what you love. You don't have to slog it out and work and do stuff that you hate over time, because it's part of your learning and part of your lifestyle. So anyway, I'm probably overstating this, but I believe that it's going to be multi-career.
Well, they call it the new map of life. Because
what's the new map of life?
The new map of life is probably more cyclical. So we lived through a time when education, for instance, was front end loaded, right? Everybody got a degree, at 21, let's say. They started families in their 20s or 30s. They had their careers, and then they retired. But everything was front end loaded. Well, that's no longer a reality. That's not even practical, because I want to learn something new now. I want to go back and access different types of education, or skill myself in different ways. And none of the traditional milestones apply today. Children are living home into their not leaving home and living at home well into their 30s. Most people don't get married, and if they do, they get married later. When do they have children? At the upper end of the range of possibility, in their late 30s and 40s. Nothing is the same any longer, and it continues to shift. There are 23% of Canada's population by 2025 will be over the age of 65. We already have more than half the population over the age of 50, and we have fewer people under the age of 14 than ever before. More over 65. We need to start reframing this whole, concept of what aging is about.
We're chatting tonight with Helen Hirsh Spence and Valerie Fox about ageism and about the top 60 over 60. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Helen and Valerie in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're having a really interesting conversation, at least I think it is, with Helen Hirsh Spence, who has launched a for-profit social enterprise called the Top 60 Over 60, which is about really inclusiveness being extended to include people that are over the age of 60, people that are experienced in life and have crystallized knowledge rather than fluid knowledge. I love that. I've got crystallized knowledge, I think.
No, it's intelligence. It's called
crystallized intelligence. Okay, sorry, I apologize about that. And Valerie Fox, who is an expert at incubators and business accelerators and mentors a lot of young people and a lot of older people in regards to how to become entrepreneurs and successful. Maybe I could ask you, Helen, about jobs, though, employers. I think a lot of employers are reluctant to hire someone that's over the age of 55 or 60 or for sure, approaching 65, because do they want to invest in that individual? How long are they going to stay? And I had this conversation with someone and they said, you know what? It's almost like the attitude people had toward pregnant females or females of a certain age, that they were worried they might be pregnant. And, at one point in time, people wouldn't have hired a pregnant female or wouldn't have hired a female that had just got married and that they thought was going to have a baby. And asking some female if they planned on becoming a mother at one point in time was a question you could ask. And then over time, it became completely inappropriate that you wouldn't ask that. And you would hire good people because you wanted good people, even if they were going to take maternity leave. And then they found out that, hey, a whole bunch of men were taking paternity leave and you lost them for a while as well. And so, that sort of went away. And it was a question you no longer asked. And they said that age is going to become like that. It is. Yeah.
That's absolutely true. Again, I think what you need to do is debunk those myths. For instance, I'm not quoting research, but I'm citing research, and I can give you, all the background if you wanted. It's been proven that older adults take less sick leave than younger ones do. So those of us who are older, interestingly enough,
really?
They tend to be their performance is often seen as better than younger. They have a greater commitment and loyalty to their roles and to their jobs because that's the way they were brought up. So the whole issue around retention and, recruiting, you hire somebody who's under 40 or so and you pay them less, but the findings are that they tend to leave, and the costs of retraining and recruiting is greater than the difference in the salary. There are all sorts of reasons. Tech savviness. I mean, we're the generation who invented computers, for God's sake, get over it. And the statistics prove that there are more than 75% of older adults who feel comfortable, and I'm talking about like over 70, who feel comfortable with technology. The most successful entrepreneurs are older entrepreneurs between the ages of 55 and 64. They last longer and they're more profitable. There are so many myths about aging that are totally erroneous, to put it nicely. And those are the kinds of things that I hope to get out and be invited to speak at other occasions, which I already have, keynote at conferences, whatnot. And people are flabbergasted because it's there. The research is there and it's proven. It also proves that the bottom line improves when you've got multiple generations working together.
Well, there's been lots of studies that show that diversity of race, of religion, of functional area, et cetera, is very helpful to companies. And so it only makes sense that diversity in age group would as well. I mean, you think about, people saying that they had to have, you should have people of different ethnic groups and different sexual orientations. If you're going to be selling goods to those people, makes sense. If you're going to be selling goods to older people, you might as well have some older people that figure out how to market to them and how to sell to them and how to write copy for them and things like that. Valerie, can you become an entrepreneur when you're 65, 70 years old?
Oh, so many. That's what was so interesting, because when I got started in doing this kind of business, I guess 12 or so years ago, at first it was all youth and that kind of stuff. But within a year or two, I started meeting all kinds of serial entrepreneurs who were well into their 50s, 60s, 70s. And what was interesting is that they loved it. And what's interesting too, I loved what Helen was saying, was that the loyalty, the stick-to-itiveness, the inclusiveness. I don't know what it is. I have a feeling it's just because the experience of being an entrepreneur shows you that you actually have to work with a lot of different people. I think diversity is one of those things that has been proven time and time again that it is helpful for your business. And so because of that, people who have had multiple experiences, either in their own business and serial entrepreneurs, or those who have come out of a corporate setting or not-for-profit setting and then start their own, all of a sudden apply it in that realm. They realize that diversity is where it's at. And so they do hire multiple ages as well as different genders and different races, et cetera. And we're seeing more and more of that. So it is pretty exciting to be able to see it. I'm dying to ask you a question, Brian. Am I allowed to do that?
Sure.
Because I'm curious on what you think about it. You've interviewed so many different people. You must be seeing the same trend that's going on here, that more and more people who are over the age of 50 are doing amazing things, especially in the 21st century.
Yeah, no, I think, and it's interesting because I mentioned I interviewed Ralph Ben-Murgy a week ago. We talked about attitudes being different in the United States versus Canada in politics, and how, there's two people that ran for president last year that were in their 70s. And while that was accepted and experience and wisdom seemed to be benefit, people thought that would be a benefit. There was still a lot of negative comments made in regards to, one of them sleeping when they closed their eyes, and the other one obviously, getting old when they couldn't walk down a ramp and things like this. And there, those memes were played over and over and over again, and so therefore there were jokes about the age. But yet in Canada, it appears that you got to be in your 40s. Being 50 might be too old to become prime minister in Canada, and inexperience seems to be valued rather than experience. And I do think that there's something there that, and maybe it's because of past experiences with people that may have had more age, more longevity, and that didn't work out, may have harmed our attitudes in Canada toward people of an older age in politics. But hopefully that's going to change. And what he had said is that and maybe this is your crystal intelligence versus fluid intelligence comment. He said that really what we don't have is enough respect for wisdom that's gained over time. That maybe what we do is if someone's got technical skills, and both of you have talked about computer and information technology skills, but that you can gain in a couple of months or a year or two, that we may value that to a far greater degree than someone that has mentored, hired, fired, trained, etc., hundreds of people over a lifetime of a career, and knows better how to deal with people based on wisdom, and that we've therefore got to value wisdom more than just pure intelligence, particularly if it's fluid intelligence.
I just want to interject and say, because I'm really weary about people talking about wisdom just because they're old. There are a lot of old people who are not wise. I think we have to be mindful of the fact that not everybody has the same to offer, but there's no question you don't have wisdom if you don't have age. So I see that as being,
well, there's an old Greek adage that said that you suffer yourself to wisdom, or you suffer your way to wisdom. And so, and I do think that, I think one of the realities of life is that you don't learn from just positive, easy experiences. You learn the most from those tough, sometimes frankly negative experiences, and that's when you learn the most. And if you're just starting out in your career, you haven't had those many tough negative experiences. And I do think as well, and maybe this goes to your comment about everyone delaying everything. There was a great book that I read at one point in time about, and I can't remember the title of it, but that the 20s are becoming teenage years, that people really used to become adults when they were in their 20s, a generation ago, but now people are extending teenage years for another 10 years, and they're delaying moving out, they're delaying education, they're delaying marriage, they're delaying getting careers. They're delaying a whole bunch of the decisions that one would have made when they were 20 or 21, 50 years ago. And they're not making those decisions until they're 30, 31. And that extends to home ownership, that extends to first child, that extends to marriage, et cetera. And so it's as if teenage years have expanded and adult years have expanded.
That's right. That's the new map of life.
But then you said, Helen, in something that you wrote, that retirement is a damaging word. Why do you think retirement is a damaging word?
Well, I don't think it's I think it's a term that references a chronological age at which we can stop working. But I don't think that most people, as Val said, I don't think most of us stop working. We may not be remunerated in the same way or working from financial means, but that doesn't mean that we aren't working. And the word retirement really implies that you pull back, pause, and there's a connotation of decline, and your best before date has passed. When in fact, it's obvious from the research that the best years for people are between 60 and 70 and 70 and 80. And nobody would believe that. But I mean, when you look at people, do surveys, how happy they're, it's called the U-curve of happiness. I don't know if you're familiar with that term or the book. People are happiest at the beginning of the curve, and in the middle, where they have children and families and careers and whatnot, they're at the bottom of the U-curve. And then once the families have gone and the careers are settled, later in life, they're the happiest again. And there's truth in that, obviously, because it's constantly being talked about. So we have this negative image about what it means to grow old. And the other thing is, we keep talking about chronological age. It's just a number. Your attitude is infinitely more important. And there's something called subjective age. So I bet you, Brian,
I think I'm 40.
Exactly. You feel like you're 40, don't you?
I do.
And you look like you feel like you're 40. And that's what matters. And you're still working as if you were perhaps 40. And people aren't taking that into account. And it's that subjective age that is a better determinant than anything else of what people
But do you think in Canada, we could elect someone prime minister 75, 78 years old?
Yeah.
Depends on the person.
Yeah.
When there's, comments about charisma and cool hair and stuff like that. Could we actually vote for someone that is 75 or 78 in Canada?
Absolutely.
Like I said, it's the person. So
what about a company? Would a company hire a CEO that's over 70?
They do. And what's interesting, though, I was going to interject that there's new types of careers that are coming up. In fact, what people are doing now, they hire something called a fractional CEO. So a fractional CEO is someone who works part-time. Usually they're ones who have multiple experiences as a CEO. They're brought on for a startup to really get them to a higher level. And they kill it. And people are demanding these types of people. So it's one of those types of employment that is really starting to climb now. And I was going to make a point about that. It's because experience counts. And because as you're both saying, that when you're over a certain age doesn't mean that you don't matter anymore. And all that accumulated knowledge and experience have just multiple outlets for it. It's just, I think that a number of people who are looking to employ others might, to your point, they might be looking at a person who is over a certain age and say, they probably they won't fit into the culture. I have seen just the opposite. I am seeing companies, again, that have multiple generations in them that are just doing spectacularly. So it's also having the experience of seeing that. I think even in the very large corporations, you're seeing a real mix of ages now, and people are even being brought back from retirement to actually help the company move into other spaces. So yes, the answer is yes, they are hiring.
We're chatting tonight with Valerie Fox, who is a business accelerator and a mentor and someone that believes in business incubators, and Helen Hirsh Spence, who is the founder of an organization, a social enterprise called the Top 60 Over 60. And they're both talking about ageism and how we got to destroy that term and be more inclusive and accept that people of all ages can contribute to companies, to society, etc. We're going to take a final break for some messages and come back more with Helen and Valerie in just a minute with some concluding comments. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Helen Hirsh Spence, who is the founder of an organization called the Top 60 Over 60, and it's a social enterprise talking about the benefit that people over the age of 60 can contribute to society. And Valerie Fox, who is a business incubator and accelerator expert and mentor to people of all ages. Ladies, my mom is almost 90, and she's got two lines that I love. And they sort of go to Helen, some of your comments about both fitness and mental fitness. And she says, you don't stop dancing when you get old. You get old when you stop dancing. Mm-hmm. And then she says, but the other thing people forget, and it goes maybe to your intelligence and your social interaction. She says, you don't stop playing bridge when you get old. You get old when you stop playing bridge. And frankly, you get dementia when you stop playing bridge. And so her comment is that she thinks that bridge, that number one is demanding of intelligence, but also interacting. And she says, Brian, that you always don't want to play with the best players, because sometimes you actually learn a lot more by playing with dumb players, inexperienced players, because it's more challenging and it's more interesting to teach them and to understand how they play. So is there something in this that you got to challenge yourself as you age?
Your mother's brilliant. She's wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. As I said, it's all about your attitude. And there's some key factors that you really have to keep in mind. And she spoke to all of them in those two quotes that you gave us. Keep on learning, keep on challenging yourself, do things differently. You can't keep doing crossword puzzles and think that you're going to avoid anything other than maybe boredom. You need to change up, do Sudokus and do other things as well. There's so much to say. And the bridge, the social engagement is a critical factor to positive well-being. If you think negatively about aging, the research shows you will die 7.5 years sooner than somebody who thinks positively about aging. And that's not everybody, obviously, but there is such a correlation between being content, finding joy, interacting with others, learning. Those are really very, very important factors.
Helen, if people want to check out your organization, is there a website they can go to?
Oh, yeah, please do. And we have a monthly newsletter. Yes, just go to www.top60, all written out, TOP60, written out, over60.com. And you can get in touch there. And lots of resources and lots of ideas. Thank you.
When is it too old to become an entrepreneur?
Never. You can become an entrepreneur whenever, if you want to. There's a lot of resources out there. There's so many awesome people that you could be connecting with. Yeah, at any time. I love the question because it's really true.
If people want to join your accelerator or your incubator or access your mentoring, how do they do that? Is there a website they can go to or social media?
Absolutely. It's called thepivotalpoint.ca. But Honestly, I really hope that they go to top 60 over 60 because I'll meet them there because we have events all the time and I would get to hang out with them and that would be amazing.
I had the opportunity a couple of weeks ago to visit an old boss of mine, Jim Patterson, 92 years old, runs I don't know, it's probably close to $10 billion annual revenue organization. The man's a billionaire. He goes to work every day. He loves it. And I asked him why. And he said, I'm having more fun than I could ever dream.
Exactly. Yeah.
And he
Look
runs
at
a
the
good
two
business.
of us. Look at the two of us.
What do you mean the two of you? The three of us.
Oh, sorry, but you're not over 60 yet.
I am.
Oh
Yeah.
my God. Wow. The over 60 club. Okay.
I
Cool.
want to be on your over 60. Anyway, ladies, it's been a real pleasure. Helen Hirsh Spence of the top 60 over 60, and Valerie Fox, a business accelerator, incubator mentor. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us. I think that this idea of sageism versus ageism is a great line, and I thank you for bringing this issue to our attention. I really appreciate it. That's our show for tonight, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca. You can get all my podcasts and video casts on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. See, I'm technologically, and I'm also on Audible, on Apple Podcasts, on Speakeasy, if you can believe it. And more people are accessing my shows now on these online platforms than they are on the radio, but still on AM radio. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Cool.